This
First,
conference will now be recorded.
thank you, Michael. Welcome to the very first resurrection of the CBW group. As was said in the blog that was published by Jeff Catlin, we did have this project started back in 2017. It was really focused on access points. And we actually deployed a CBW solution at our 2017 summit, our global summit. And it was a huge success, but after that, I think we might have been a little ahead of our time. And because of some acquisitions that occurred, that particular solution was tabled. And we didn't have enough interest in the community. We went off and focused on other things. And now we've had another insurrection in the sense that we've had multiple companies come forward and ask us if we're going to restart this group. And so talking to Jeff and talking to a few other people on the call, Omar, we thought this was a really, really good time in 2021 to kickstart this group back into action. With that, Jeff Catlin is our IC chair and is one of our IC chairs, and Omar Baldonado is also present. He is one of our networking project leads, and they have generously allocated their time, and Jeff has initially volunteered to help kickstart this group. We are still looking for volunteers from the community to help us lead this group. This particular sub-project will be under our networking top-level project, which is why Omar and Rupa will be helping quite a lot in terms of navigating this, and whoever ends up leading this project group, helping them transition in. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Omar. If Omar's here, Omar, would you like to add a few words before Jeff gets started?
No, I think you captured it really well, Archana. And then I think one thing to emphasize is community involvement, right? All of our sub-projects have been really spearheaded by invested and caring community members who really want to see a project move forward in the open forum that is OCP. And that's what we had before with the first iteration of CBW, and now a couple of years later, hopefully we can have another crack at it again, but again relying upon you all in the community. Thanks. Jeff?
Okay, well, thank you, Archana and Omar. Can everybody hear me okay? Just an audio check? Good?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So thanks everyone that's attending. For those of you that attended the presentation at the Tech Week, you'll unfortunately suffer through it again, but I'll be quick. So let's get going here. So my name is Jeff Catlin, and as Archana said, I am the one of the co-leads of the incubation committee for OCP. So I am also an employee of EdgeCore Networks, who is very active in open communities. OCP being, one of the open communities that EdgeCore is very active in also. So I kind of have the opportunity to look at this from 2 points of view, from a supplier point of view, and kind of understand some of the customer requests and traction that's going on in the market, but also from looking at it from an open community point of view, and being able to see the action that's going on in open communities, not only OCP, but the other open communities as well, and what they're doing and gearing up for targeting to this type of environment. So that's kind of how I come about this and have put this presentation together. So just a little background on that. So as Archana said, the CBW group, Campus Branch and Wireless is what CBW stands for. It started back in 2017 and went for about a year or so, and then it was kind of suspended. I'd like to think it was so successful that it caused an acquisition in the industry, and Mojo Networks got acquired by Arista. Now, I'm not sure if that's absolutely 100% true, but that's what I'd like to think.
We'd like to take credit for that for sure.
But Mojo Networks was one of the primary disaggregated NOS suppliers for the Wi-Fi solutions at that point, and they did get acquired by Arista Networks. One of the major NOS suppliers at that point for the switch designs, for the PoE type switches that went along with the access points, was a company called SnapRoute, and they were on a very good trajectory, and they went through some rough times, and that unfortunately ended up falling apart. So we kind of ended up without a NOS partner for the access points, and without a NOS partner at that point in time for the switches that those access points connected to. So that's kind of what led to the group slowing down and eventually kind of getting paused for a while. So that's just a little bit of history there. There are some white papers that were written, though, based on the 2018 summit and what we did for providing Wi-Fi access to the expo floor at the summit, and the amount of users and the bandwidth throughput that was provided and all that stuff. So that's archived somewhere. If that's of interest, we can dig that up. But I think it was quite successful what we did at the summit there to show that disaggregation and openness, can certainly come to a different type of environment, be it, the enterprise type environment for, switching and access points. So is it time to restart the CBW group? And again, I kind of went over kind of how I look at this and where I get my input from. But there seems to be more and more customers now that are familiar with disaggregation and open networking fundamentals, and those customers, a lot of those customers, are already deploying disaggregated solutions in their network. So if you look at some of the very large enterprise or retail type customers, they've already adopted open networking and disaggregation in their network, so they understand it, they understand the benefits of it, and also the challenges. And they're looking for maybe some of that in their enterprise environment. We kind of talk about what an enterprise environment looks like. There's also different open communities that are working on technology pieces that could be used in this enterprise or CBW type use case. So there's been some talk, nothing official, of perhaps Sonic migrating into the enterprise environment, and there's been chatter on that for a while now. There's a new open source initiative under the Linux Foundation called DENT, and they are focused on a disaggregated network operating system targeted at the enterprise. There's a group within TIP that's working on a complete Wi-Fi software stack that's disaggregated from the underlying hardware, and that includes, the access point software all the way up to what they call like a cloud SDK, which allows controller type applications and control to be included along with that Wi-Fi software stack solution. And there's some work going on in ONF for private cellular adoption for very large enterprises who want their own private cellular network instead of Wi-Fi, perhaps, just for the different reasons on security and performance and the likes of that. So, that project's going on as well. So, to me, we start to see customers that are asking about this and familiar with disaggregation and open networking, and then a lot of work going on in, other communities for technology pieces that would lend itself to this. If we look at kind of this picture here shows a couple of things. So initial consumers, perhaps, for CBW type technology would be, again, large retailers who are familiar with disaggregation, OCP, and the likes of all, open networking principles. Telecom providers, there's many of them which provide managed services to enterprise customers, and there's a lot of those that are either in deployment or doing POCs and will be in deployment with disaggregated solutions here, in the near future this year. And then there's financial services companies, again, that have their own large enterprise installations and a lot of remote and branch offices. And a lot of those financial service companies, very large ones, are deploying disaggregated and open solutions today. So no specific customer names here, but if you follow along in the open communities, you can associate some names with each one of these three categories: the retailers, the telecoms, the financial services guys that might be interested in this CBW type effort. So those are the customers, and then if we look at a very simplistic stick-figure diagram of these networks, we of course have the main office, and that can be a campus environment or whatever that facilities may look like. And then as you go out from that, a lot of these large type customers that are listed here on the left would have large networks that would include, branch office locations, perhaps. If they're a retailer type of thing, they may have warehouses scattered throughout the world where they ship their products to before it goes to the final endpoint. And that final endpoint could be a direct customer, or it could be perhaps one of their retail facilities. So distributions and warehouse retail facilities, there's many types of those, from not only large retailers that have their own retail facilities, but telecom providers. If you look at the likes of perhaps an AT&T in North America, or maybe other telecom operators around the world, they have a large number of retail facilities scattered throughout the world where they service their customers. So, they understand open networking principles and a large footprint of those types of places as well. And, with what's happened here over the last year, there's, of course, an increase in home office users, like all of us are probably right now. So perhaps there's the opportunity for some products or solutions in this space which, satisfy the need for these home users and their home office locations and what's going to be deployed there. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the types of consumers of these solutions and products, and a very high-level stick-figure diagram of where those products may be deployed. And I would think the CBW type products would be deployed on the outlying network locations here, the branch offices or the warehouses and distribution facilities first, rather than maybe the main office location. That's just my opinion, but that's usually how deployment of disaggregated solutions have been in the past. It goes out to the edges of the network where there's very high volume, and they can enjoy some of the benefits of open networking as that moves out towards the edge. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions on any of this so far. Okay. So with that, kind of where could we begin with this type of effort and different products? So I just kind of highlighted here in red circles very obvious locations of places, products being hardware and software, would be required, perhaps in these remote offices or distribution facilities or whatever they are. So there would be an opportunity for some kind of demarcation device that is placed at that facility, and that may be managed and operated by the network owner itself, or by a managed service offering type of solution provider as well. We just had some of those types of products come through OCP recently, and you'll see those. They came through the telco group, but there was four different SKUs, I think, for SD-WAN or UCP type of products. So, OCP is going to have some of those in the short term available through contributions, and perhaps there's different SKUs or use cases that would lend itself to have additional type products in that area. Moving into the facility, of course, you have some number of switches there that connect to this demarcation device. and provide connectivity for various things in the internal network. And those various things would be perhaps directly connected users, with wired connections. They would most certainly have some kind of Wi-Fi connectivity, I would think, in those facilities. So those switches, some of them would provide power over Ethernet to provide power to these Wi-Fi access points, as well as network connectivity. There'd probably be, depending on the type of location, there could be private Wi-Fi for the internal use of the business, as well as public Wi-Fi that the facility offers to some of its customers. So those would be obvious areas of interest. Private cellular, as I talked about before, is certainly of interest to a lot of the very large enterprise 4.0 type of companies that are out there. So you start to see a lot more of that in the press and the trade rags that is being talked about. So that could be, although not highlighted here in a red circle, could be an area of focus as well. What types of hardware products or perhaps software solutions are needed to provide private cellular connectivity into these enterprise environments or these remote locations. And then there's all these other types of devices. I'm not saying that we have to undertake doing those, but they're certainly prevalent in these locations. There's many cameras in these, whether it's a retail or distribution facility, many cameras. You'd be surprised how many cameras these installations have. And they all need, for the most part, network connectivity, and a lot of them power as well. There's point of sale terminals, there's point of sale payments and phones and inventory management and all that type of stuff, which needs, network connectivity out in these locations as well.
Hey, Jeff?
Yep.
This is Dan. A couple of observations here. There's sort of two other things that are coming to my mind. One is other sorts of traffic, and these in the building, these involve essentially building management stuff. You've got sensors there, but that not necessarily IP, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's going in now with building security, building health and safety. And the other is this notion of CBRS, which yesterday the CBRS Alliance changed its name to the OnGo Alliance, and it incorporates some 3GPP stuff for countries that don't have the CBRS in the US. And that's another way people are trying to get at least into some of the industrial facilities that you showed on the previous slide.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dan. The CBRS, that's just the spectrum that was being sold off for the private cellular stuff.
Yes.
Public cellular stuff as well, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the notion of private LTE and private 5G is starting to permeate some of the larger campuses, manufacturing places, mines, things that are not necessarily in an urban office setting.
Right. That's what I'm starting to see as well. Those types of environments. Yep. Okay. That's good. So those are just potential areas. There's other types of products, as Dan mentioned, and there's even more opportunities here for disaggregation and openness, be it in hardware and or software. So this was just kind of a very high level, where to begin type of thing. So again, this just goes over that in some words rather than pictorial, what types of solutions could be included. So I'm not going to go over that. This kind of shows, an ecosystem that is available for us to form and strengthen if we want to go after, this type of environment with these types of products. So again, on the upper left, we have the initial consumers of this technology, and I do feel that there are consumers that would adopt this technology from a disaggregated and open type solution. On the right-hand side, we have technology partners, and these would be either chip type partners like the Marvells and the Broadcoms. These might be software NOS partners for switches that provide power over Ethernet. That might be a Cumulus or a Pika 8. They could be a Wi-Fi provider, solution provider, software-based Wi-Fi solution provider. So there's a company, and Sebastiano's on, from and ANZA, who have ported their solution to the CBW open Wi-Fi access points that we did back in 2018. So their solution actually supports those Wi-Fi access points today. So, you know, there would be more and more, I think, as we get going, of those types of commercial partners for software, be it, you know, on a switch, on a Wi-Fi access point, on a private LTE device, on a whatever the case may be. So I think it would be fairly easy to stimulate an ecosystem of technology partners along with initial consumers. Underneath technology partners on the bottom right, again, we have open communities that are working on technology, you know, bits and pieces that would serve this type of market as well. And I've touched upon those. It's, you know, the DENT telecom infra project with the Wi-Fi stuff, ONF with their Ether private cellular focus thing. OpenWRT is an open source community, and that's part of the basis for the TIP Wi-Fi software stack. So that's another community that we could engage with. There's, of course, our own community of Sonic and other things internal in OCP, which we can use as technology pieces to get this moving. And then on the bottom left, there's many supplier partners that would be interested in this. And these are just three that I've reached out to because I have contacts here. Of course, I'm from EdgeCore, and I have contacts from previous engagements with someone at Delta and Wistron, and they've both agreed that, you know, they would be active and do contributions from a hardware perspective into this ecosystem if we can, you know, get this moving and going forward. So that's just an overview of an ecosystem, which of course you need a healthy ecosystem if we're going to, you know, start this back again. So, what call to action? This is my call to action from the Tech Week. I do have a couple more slides that go over to a few more specifics of what I think we need to do in the next meeting and initial organization of this group. So, you know, I'll stop here and see if there's any, hopefully there is, comments that people have about kind of the opportunity that I kind of laid out here. Maybe I missed some pieces. Maybe I'm incorrect on some pieces. Maybe there's different views. I'd like to hear some feedback from people on the call if there is any.
Hi, Jeff. This is Sebastian. You guys hear me?
Yes.
So I have a very specific question here because first of all, I'm super proud of seeing our logo in that right upper quadrant, I would say, of Tenaza. But sometimes I feel we're kind of very small guys, or, you know, the software startup, and I see a lot of big names here, and even seeing the list of the people and the companies involved. So I wonder, what is the best way, according to experience in other projects, for a software startup to do their best and provide most of the contribution we can provide in a situation like this, basically?
So I can just tell you what I'm seeing from an EdgeCore perspective in the telco environment. So there's very large telcos that are interested in disaggregation and openness and all those good things that go along with it. The problem, of course, is how do they deploy and support this, right? If you look at some of the projects that are out there, the ONF Ether project, that has a lot of moving pieces for software in there. Even the TIP Wi-Fi stuff, there's a lot of moving components and software pieces in that to make it deployable. So what we're seeing from an EdgeCore standpoint in the telco environment is they've gone to the next level and said, okay, we understand the benefits, we understand the complexity of deploying this, and we're going to go through system integration partners. And these system integration partners are very large system integrators like Tech Mahindras and Capgeminis and Wipros and the likes of those for the telecom providers, right? And so that's, if you're involved in that stuff, you start to see RFIs and RFQs come out now that specify a list of system integrators that these, telco operators will be using or are suggesting to be using, and all the vendors line up behind them. So these system integrators, will give these customers that, OEM type of experience that they're used to. So, to me, that's the piece that's really crucial if you're going to go after some of these larger operators, which of course will be the initial consumers of these pieces of technology as well. Now, some large customers, their own large engineering forces, and they can be self-sufficient, but of course not all of them. So that's where I think system integrators are going to be very important for this as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Don't be shy.
Yeah, this is Valerie from Intel. How would you, TIP has several working groups. How would you differentiate what TIP is doing with what this group is doing?
So TIP is mostly focused on carrier type environments, bringing connectivity to unconnected people in the world, which involves things outside of buildings for the most part, or enterprise environments or campus environments. So there is some overlap, but what I see in TIP is a lot of focus on those other areas that it takes to bring internet connectivity to other regions of the world, or enhance the internet connectivity that's there. So, for example, the TIP Wi-Fi group, they're doing, and Sebastiano, you can chime in here as well. They're doing open Wi-Fi. For the most part, they're doing that solution software, not so much hardware. There are vendors participating, but there's not a lot of hardware contributions. And that's really targeted at, I guess, carrier type of Wi-Fi installations, not enterprise or in-building specific type of deployments. Now, and then there'll be overlap in between them, and I'm not an expert in this area, but maybe there's some differentiation between those use cases, which would cause different hardware designs, perhaps, or maybe some different features or functions to be put into the software that's used, either for provisioning or management or security or something like that.
Can I jump in? Sorry for this. I just wanted to add something, because we have been one of the founding members of the TIP Wi-Fi group in 2019, and it took some months to get to a definition of what would be the goal exactly. So yeah, there is a difference in terms of the focus, which is what you just said. From the architectural standpoint, I would say there is a big important difference, because the way the group in TIP is actually converging is to disaggregate, but from the, let's say, access point API perspective. So in the scope of the TIP group, there is a software stack that includes firmware and also cloud SDK, so that it makes easier to build a cloud, let's say, software cloud controller. But it's not yet clear if the NOS on the access point is going to be only the one provided by TIP. So in other words, the TIP perspective wants to disaggregate the access point as firmware plus hardware from the cloud. What I think the OCP perspective is more NOS agnostic, doesn't impose any open source NOS. So I think this would be the most important difference. And I think if you think in terms of the impact on a NOS provider, that's a pretty important difference. At least this would be my take.
Okay, thanks. No, Sebastian, I'm part of TIP, so thanks for that. And then the other question, I guess, is how do y'all? I guess this seems like it's part hardware, part software, correct? This and when you disaggregate the and try to do this, how the controllers that are out there already, the Ciscos and Arubas and stuff, they all have a lot of proprietary implementations, of course. I'm not sure how do you see this impacting enterprises who already have Cisco or Aruba type of Wi-Fi capability, from a controller and from an access point? Or is this Or are you targeting strictly greenfield?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have the answer. I can give you my opinion based on historical perspective of just disaggregation in general. So I don't think disaggregation I don't think it requires open source. So, OCP is a great place for open hardware designs and software, don't get me wrong. But I think the first stage of disaggregated deployments will be with commercial software offerings. Would be my guess. That's just my personal opinion. And if you kind of look with a telco, so, at EdgeCore we go about open networking in 3 market segments, right? There's the data center, and then the telco, and the enterprise is the third leg on the stool. If you kind of follow what happened along the way, or is happening, disaggregation starts out with many commercial options available that ride on top of the disaggregated hardware. And then there'll be some software, open source options that come into play. And over time, perhaps the commercial options, some of them go away either through acquisition or just naturally can't make it. And one of those software open source options, usually rises, kind of to the top. And if you look back at the data center market, that's kind of what I saw anyway. With there was a lot of startups in the beginning focused on that market. A lot of them, not a lot of them, some of them went away. Big Switch and Cumulus went away through acquisition. Some of the other ones just went away naturally. There was a couple open source options in the beginning, SnapRoute and Sonic, and I think there was Open Switch. So there's 3 open source options. And over time, what you saw is one of those open source options, took hold, which was Sonic. I think you'll see that in the telco environment. And I think the enterprise environment will follow suit. I think the enterprise environment here is very early on still, and it's at the beginning of that trajectory. I think that trajectory will go faster as you go through the 3 market segments. But I think commercial partners in the ecosystem are very important to have, not just all open source.
I agree.
Made sense.
That's a great point.
Makes sense, thanks.
I do find it odd to see OCP and TIP diverging and having different approaches to Wi-Fi, because I think they're targeting a lot of the same customers.
Yeah, I don't know as we're diverging. I'm not sure what the answer would be. I think once we get started, if we get started on this path, maybe, and again, this is just thinking out loud, maybe OCP is more of the hardware repository for Wi-Fi access points, and maybe TIP provides the base software package, perhaps, if that's suitable for these enterprise type environments, and then people can make changes to that base Wi-Fi software package. Perhaps that's one way it could go. I'm not sure how it would go.
I'd certainly like to see them work in a complementary fashion and not, overlapping. And I think Valerie's point is really good to bring that up.
Yeah, no, me too. It doesn't make sense, for different open communities to overlap and compete with each other. For me, it makes much more sense for them to come together and figure out what pieces can be done to make a solution more viable and spread adoption.
I guess one thing also though is each of the organizations has their particular use case or domain that they're focusing on. And so, sometimes people have asked me like, hey, shouldn't we just have one NOS to rule them all? And then I think, the obvious thing is like, well, a NOS that works for the data center hyperscalers is different from data center enterprise, is different from edge. This is just in the pure switching, wired switching case. But so here with TIP, right, you want each community to focus on, hey, let's do this. Let's do everything we can to make a more accessible networking internet on the edge for the most part, right? And if Dent in the Linux Foundation really wants to focus on enterprise NOS, they should do that. And there's no one saying that like, hey, why doesn't Amazon or Dent use the same NOS that the TIP 5G folks are using? Different use cases. So I agree that we don't want to have too much overlap, but at the same time, I don't want to force overlap where there isn't any. And Jeff's point, which is, if we're gonna, none of the groups really seem to be focused on providing that open hardware underneath, which is what I think OCP could do. And needing then, of course, to work with Linux Foundation or TIP or with whoever else that could provide the NOSes on top, or it's not just the NOSes, but the software, cloud controller, whatever else on top of the hardware.
Omar, you bring up a good point. This is Michael. And you bring up a really good point there in your last statement, especially around controller. You know, that's the other thing that's kind of missing in this ecosystem is how are we going to establish, you know, some type of a controller mechanism, you know, for an OS. And I think that's always been the challenge, whether it's Sonic or whatever it is. You know, you leave it up to the customer to figure out how to manage it. You know, how do you expand the ecosystem to include some SI or partner who can help with the management? That's the only way that you're going to get a really good attach rate, you know, of either new hardware or software, in my opinion.
Yep, no, that's a good point.
I was wondering if Dan or Sebastiano, you have any thoughts on some of that controller cloud work as well?
Nothing that's really congealed to a single thing. I think we need to, what we should be consistent, of course, is interfaces and not implementations of, you know, either above or below the interface. So that includes the cloud as well as the, you know, AP software.
I want to add a thing here, because adding to what was just said a few minutes ago. On one side, I'm very intrigued by the idea of the NOS to rule them all, but at the same time, it's absolutely clear that it's kind of impossible to have only one. So the thing where I think there could be a very strong synergy between the two groups is solving the problem that ONI solves, basically, in networking. So you can't use ONI in Wi-Fi because of many reasons. You're not in a data center. You have the compliance issue for the mission. So you have to ship devices and boxes which are able to broadcast, and they have to be validated. So I think one way of seeing it, because TIP is actually going to solve both problems, they will standardize devices that can be manufactured and shipped around. And it will be possible for the controller to do firmware upgrades. So if you see this as something that is kind of coupled in a loose way, that you can, as a controller, upgrade the NOS of the device with some degree of freedom, it's basically like if the TIP infrastructure could be seen as the ONI for Wi-Fi. You can use that so that manufacturers can build universal SKUs that can be attached to any controller. But maybe the first controller is actually a TIP controller. And then if you're happy with the NOS provided by TIP, that's fantastic. But then you have the freedom to use that infrastructure simply to load your NOS, whatever that is. I think this is the way to do both things. So if we can have a chance to build the NOS that rules them all, then we'll have a unified protocol to talk to the controller. And then if there is, but we also have the flexibility to change the NOS if that is a need. So I think this is, after thinking about it quite a lot, this is like the best way to see the two systems and the two groups cooperating as much as possible, allowing each group to be what they are, basically. This would be one possible approach, I would say.
Okay, that makes sense.
Again, this is my idea. This is not the perspective of the TIP group, so I can't talk for TIP at this stage. And this is just one possible option, actually.
No, understood. We're all individuals here with opinions.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what is that ONI like. ONI is, I mean, it's a little bit of it's a different function, right? It's the loading function, but what is that really low layer piece that we can make open so it can be shared amongst multiple solutions, but then B doesn't require the full stack above it, right? And can enable a bunch of other solutions, right? The ONI was nice because there was a clear decoupling, right? It served the loader notion, and then once it loaded something, it was up to every, you could just do commercial, you could do open source, you could do whatever else. If there's something that we can define, that interfaces layer that that Dan was referring to, that might be worthwhile, and maybe that's the layer closest to the hardware, that then lets a bunch of different groups and solutions, evolve. I don't know what that is, because the thing that I've seen usually is that people tend to go up the stack pretty high, pretty quickly, right? Well, our solution should have this, and it should have this, and it should have this, and then now you've got sort of a vertical solution that no one else is going to adopt because it's just gone up too high in the stack. That's my own sort of perspective on it, that trying to define just thin layers of interfaces would be would enable more proliferation of solutions.
Omar, do you think it's possible to add all that logic that allows to load a NOS, but also ship devices that actually have Wi-Fi active inside ONI? Because the way I was seeing ONI, the kind of ONI for Wi-Fi would be, in essence, a full NOS that you replace completely. So it's kind of improper to say it's kind of like ONI. But if we take the other approach, we try to add what is needed to ship a device so that they can pass compliance certifications and tests, simply adding the Wi-Fi stack to ONI itself. It's kind of a crazy idea in some way, but it's actually what is needed if we want to have a lower layer that is there to remain.
Interesting. I mean, it does sound intriguing to see what other groups think about that. What other solution providers find that a viable layer or interface? Is it low level enough? Again, one of the nice things about the ONI interface, as well as some of the other low layer interfaces, is that multiple companies with their own solutions felt like they could come to it, and they didn't feel like they were giving away the too much IP there, that they felt like, okay, yeah, we can converge on this open source or common solution. So I'm intrigued by it, Sebastian. I think we have to hear if other folks are.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just have 2 more slides. I want to make sure I get through these for next steps before we run out of time here at the top of the hour. We got about 10 minutes left. And then if there's other time, we can certainly carry on the conversation. So I just threw this together this afternoon, as far as the organizing and what the next steps are. OCP is looking for leadership, normally two co-chairs to run a group for this CBW project. These 2 co-chairs would help, organize meetings and group activities. So, there's the regular cadence of a meeting, whether that's every 2 weeks or every month or whatever that may be for the group. There's whatever activities that go on at Summit, getting presentations collected and reviewing and the likes of that stuff. And Omar, I don't know if you want to add anything to other responsibilities the leaders would have with this. You and Rupa would know way more than I do about responsibilities there.
No, I think really this you've captured it here, and maybe just a little bit. It's maybe sort of obvious that it is a community building. Obviously you want to move ahead to certain technical solutions and technical discussions, but you've got to be able to bring together different members of the community, whether that's inside OCP or if it's partnering with TIP or with LF or whomever else. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're looking for volunteers for the leadership roles here, and 2 of them, I guess, is what we go with. we need to write an initial charter. I, have a draft I can send out to people. I don't want to be, the one writing the charter, but a charter is pretty straightforward stuff. You, for the most part, define what's in scope and what's out of scope for the group. And it's not a once, do it once and it's done. So charters can be updated as the group matures and looks to find, different areas to participate and provide solutions for. But the group would need an initial charter, kind of penned to say what is initially in and out of scope. And then Omar, as you said, as the leadership people that would, do that initial charter, there also would be, how do you stimulate the community and the group members and the customers, suppliers, system integrators, I think are very important, which I talked about before. And then bring in, other liaisons from other communities. So that's kind of, at a high level, the organizational things that we need to get going with sooner rather than later. And then for next meeting, I think the meetings are every, I don't know if they were set up for every 2 weeks or so, or I'd have to go back and look. One thing I think we should do, Michael, is, if you're still on here, Michael Schill, is resend the meeting invite to the email group. So I've been trying to get people, when I talk to them or send them emails or whatever, as I'm interacting with them, to try to get them to join the CBW mail list, which would be the main way we communicate. So I think it's important that we, as we get people joining, we occasionally resend out the meeting invite for the series of meetings that we had scheduled today, so we can make sure everybody has them in their calendars. For the next meeting, it'd be good if some volunteers wanted to help organize and run that meeting. So this is a way perhaps for people to, see what it's like to be maybe a co-chair with the training wheels on, and what it's like, if they're interested, to run the meeting and help get the background information and preparation done. So be nice if someone wanted to volunteer for that. Invite other communities to give a brief presentation of their solutions and what other outstanding needs they might have. So I'm willing to do that. If we on this call think that's perhaps something on the agenda for the next meeting, I could invite perhaps ONF and Dent or TIP or maybe just one of them, and we stagger them out through multiple meetings to come in and give a brief overview of the solution they're working on, and what they see as potential gaps they need filled, whether that's software or hardware. So that's something I'm willing to do if we think that's appropriate. And I think we all need to invite others to attend the meeting and join the email group. This is something we want to push forward. So I think it's on all of us that are on this call to help stimulate the ecosystem of participants in this group. So with that, any volunteers for the next meeting to help organize and run the meeting? You may want to try out what it is to be a co-chair.
Jeff, I'd like to try. Trying not, I could try, let's put it this way. I'm not sure how time consuming this will become, but I want to give it a shot if that makes sense for you guys.
Okay. Thank you, John. Anyone else have any interest in, I see people leaving as they're looking for volunteers.
Yeah, hey Jeff, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, my name is Jack. I work as an independent consultant. I have some cycles now too. I can send you an email. I'd be willing to help out as well.
Okay, great, Jack. Thank you. Yeah, if you and Sebastiano and anyone else, Archie, do you want to collect names? You want them to send to the group email, or how do you want
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you wouldn't, I'm gonna put my name here in the chat. I think I also put the wiki address, the email address for wiki. So let's have Jack at least fill out an individual membership agreement, And then Sebastiano, we can work with you on Tanaza as well. But here's my email in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind just shooting me a quick email, we can work out all the details and get you guys set up.
Thank you, Archana.
Yep. Like I said, the recording will be on the wiki. I posted the address for the wiki in the chat as well. And the next call is on January 26th, which is 2 weeks from today, same time. And we're not married to this time by any means. So if there is, more people that want to attend, that want to do it earlier to be able to incorporate other parts of the world, then let us know that as well. We just kind of threw something on just so that we would have a series in place, and then we could decide collectively as the community, started doing this. So
Where can we get a copy of the slides, Archana?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and post the slides as well on the wiki. Just I have the slide deck here, Jeff. So give me a few minutes. When we post the recording, we'll also do the slide deck, and then maybe we want to start like a Google Doc, Jeff, and invite people to add their comments and possible suggestions for work streams on that Google Doc. So I could go ahead and start it with this next week preparation, bullets in there, and then we can socialize that on the mailing list. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure, yeah.
Because it'd be easier to do that than to kind of throw emails back and forth on the mailing list, right? It won't get captured anywhere, so. So I'll post,
that makes sense, yes.
And I'll post the Google Doc link as well on the wiki.
Okay, and for next meeting, since we, still have 20 some odd people here, next meeting is a couple weeks away, so not much time, but I, can reach out and try to get one or more other communities to give an overview of their solution next meeting. Do we on this call feel like that's worthwhile? And if so, how many of those do we want? I'm assuming it's 15-minute presentation, maybe from them with some Q&A after, so maybe take 20 minutes.
Are you referring to folks like have somebody from Denton Tip and ONF come in and talk about their views? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, talk about the solution they're working on,
okay,
and what gaps they see for deployment of that solution in a CBW type of use case.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. I think some of the questions today probably are in that domain. So to have those folks who are, if you can identify, an owner or at least somebody who can speak for that community could be interesting.
Okay, it seems like there was the most questions on Wi-Fi. So if we think that's appropriate, then I'll see if I can get someone from the TIP Wi-Fi group to perhaps do a presentation on the next meeting.
And Jeff, this Michael, we can, on the DIN side, we can probably do something in about 4 weeks, not next meeting, but probably the following meeting. Be good.
That'd be great. Thank you, Michael. That'd be good. Get some perspective coming in from that side as well. Okay. Sure. All right, so that's all I had. We took a whole hour. So that's good. It was a good conversation, and more attendees than I thought was going to be here. So very good. So please spread the word to your other colleagues. If you're a supplier and customers that would be consumers of CBW type technologies and solutions, reach out to your customers and have them join the mail list and be active in the group. We need just as many, if not more, customers to be involved in this as we do suppliers. So the more we can bring them into the mix here, I think the better off we'll be. And that's all I had. And Omar, you got any closing remarks here?
Thanks a lot. And to echo Jeff, I'm glad to see so many people and then a lot of folks with interest. So let's see what happens over the next bit.
Sounds good.
Thank you for setting this up.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks, all.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Archana.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.